Oscar Ferdinand Meyer, March 29, 1859 to March 11, 1955, was a German-American who founded the processed meat firm Oscar Mayer that bears his name. Meyer was born in Kosingen, now part of Neresheim, in the Kingdom of Württemberg, where his family had been foresters and ministers for generations. While he was a child, Württemberg became part of the German Empire. In 1873 he emigrated to the United States and lived in Detroit with his cousin, John Schroll. He worked in that city's meat market and in 1876 moved to Chicago with the Schrolls. Meyer found work at Armour & Company in Chicago's North Side. In 1880, he shared his idea of starting his own meat business with his younger brother, Gottfried, who was back in Germany. He asked Gottfried to begin studying the sausage-making process. Meanwhile, Oscar began saving money for the venture. 3 years later, he started a butcher and sausage-making shop of his own, when he was 24 years old, with his brothers Gottfried and Max. 5 years later, the proprietor who owned the store refused to renew Meyer's lease, hoping that he could profit from Meyer's business success. Pushed out on his own, Meyer bought a property and constructed a 2-story building for his business and family. In 1887 he married Louise Greiner, originally from Munich, and their only son, Oscar G. Meyer Sr. was born in that building. With the company's continued growth, it became a sponsor of such events as polka bands and the German exhibition at the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893. The company had grown to 43 employees in 1900, offering meat delivered across the city of Chicago and its suburbs. Capitalizing on an industry trend, in 1904 the company started using its own brands for its meat products and was one of the earliest participants in the Food Safety and Inspection Service, created under the Federal Meat Inspection Act of 1906, to verify the contents of its products. After being ill for 6 weeks, he died in his sleep on March 11, 1955, at age 95, at his home, 5727 North Sheridan Road, in Chicago, with his son and successor Oscar G. Meyer Sr. and his 3 daughters at his bedside. His wife died in 1931. By the time of his death, the business named after himself had grown to 9,000 employees, with facilities in Davenport, Iowa, Los Angeles, Madison, Wisconsin, and Philadelphia. Businessman, philanthropist. He was the second president and chairman of the board of Marshall Field & Company, an upscale department store in Chicago, Illinois, that would become its largest store and the largest wholesale and dry goods company in the world at that time. Born on a farm, he received his education in the local public schools. In 1867 he began his business career as a clerk in a grocery store in Bellows Falls, New Hampshire. Within a year he was working at another general store at Alstead. In 1870 he was employed at a dry goods store at Rutland, New Hampshire, and in 1872 he decided to move west and came to Chicago, working as a stock clerk and salesman for Marshall Field & Company, and by 1901 he had worked his way up to a vice presidency and took over as president upon the death of Marshall Field in 1906. A civic leader and founder of the Commercial Club of Chicago, he was instrumental in the club's sponsorship of the Edward Bennett and Daniel Burnham's Plan of Chicago, released in 1909, and which to this day is considered to be one of the most important urban planning documents ever created. He contributed extensively to Chicago charities, universities and museums, and in the early 1920s he provided $3 million to build Chicago's Shedd Aquarium, as a complement to the Field Museum and the Art Institute of Chicago. It was completed in 1930 and was the world's largest aquarium for most of the 20th century. He died at the age of 76. Richard Warren Sears, December 7, 1863 to September 28, 1914, was an American businessman who co-founded the department store Sears, Roebuck & Company with his partner Alva Curtis Roebuck. Sears was born in Stewartville, Minnesota. His father was James Warren Sears, born circa 1828 in New York, a blacksmith and wagon maker. His mother was Eliza Burden, born in Ohio circa 1843. The family was living in Spring Valley, Minnesota, by June 1870, where his father served as a city councilman and eventually sold his wagon shop in 1875. Both of his parents were of English descent. In 1887, Sears moved his company to Chicago, an important transportation center for the Midwestern United States, and moved his residence to nearby Oak Park, Illinois. In 1887 he also hired watch repairman Alva Curtis Roebuck to repair any watches being returned. Roebuck was Sears's first employee, and he later became co-founder of Sears, Roebuck and Company, which was formed in 1891 when Sears was 28 years old. In 1895 the company was short of cash and Roebuck had left the business. Sears sold one half of the company for $75,000 to Aaron Niesbaum and his brother-in-law, Julius Rosenwald. The company was incorporated in Illinois as Sears Roebuck and Company of Illinois on September 7, 1895. Richard Sears retired in 1908 at age 44 and Julius Rosenwald became the president. The first Sears catalog was published in 1893 and offered only watches. By 1897, items such as men's and ladies' clothing, plows, silverware, bicycles and athletic equipment had been added to the offering. The 500-page catalog was sent to some 300,000 homes. Sears catered to the rural customer because, having been raised on a farm, he knew what the rural customer needed. He also had experience working with the railroad and he knew how to ship merchandise to remote areas. In 1908 Sears made another move forward and began to sell mail-order homes through the catalogs. In 1908 Sears retired and moved from Oak Park to Lake Bluff, Illinois, suffering from failing health due to alcoholism. 6 years later, he died in Waukesha, Wisconsin, of Bright's disease. Aaron Montgomery Ward, February 17, 1843 to December 7, 1913, was an American entrepreneur based in Chicago who made his fortune through the use of mail order for retail sales of general merchandise to rural customers. In 1872 he founded Montgomery Ward and Company, which became nationally known. Ward, a young traveling salesman of dry goods, was concerned over the plight of many rural Midwest Americans who were, he thought, being overcharged and underserved by many of the small-town retailers on whom they had to rely for their general merchandise. He opened his first mail-order house in 1872. By heavy use of the railroads centered on Chicago, and by associating his business with the nonprofit patrons of husbandry, the Grangers, Ward offered rural customers a far larger stock than generally available in small towns and at a lower price. Unlike local country merchants, Ward offered no bargaining and no credit. His free catalog, printed by the most modern methods, was widely mailed to customers, allowing them to see pictures of consumer goods and imagine how they might be used. Later, Ward used the post office's rural free delivery service. He lobbied for a parcel post system that came about in 1906. The early 20th century was the heyday of mail orders and Ward's had become an American tradition, along with its rival Sears Roebuck. In civic life in Chicago, Ward fought for the poor people's access to Chicago's lakefront. In 1906 he campaigned to preserve Grant Park as a public park. Grant Park has been protected since 1836 by forever open, clear and free legislation that has been affirmed by 4 Illinois Supreme Court rulings. Ward twice sued the city of Chicago to force it to remove buildings and structures from Grant Park and to keep it from building new ones. Ward is known by some as the watchdog of the lakefront for his preservationist efforts. As a result, the city has what are termed the Montgomery Ward height restrictions on buildings and structures in Grant Park. However, Crown Fountain and the 139-foot, 42m, J. Pritzker Pavilion were exempt from the height restriction because they were classified as works of art and not buildings or structures. Montgomery Ward died in Highland Park on December 7, 1913, aged 70, and was interred at Rosehill Mausoleum in Rosehill Cemetery. Potter Palmer made his first millions with a dry goods store. Among his innovations were bargain days, the first, sales, money-back guarantees, for any reason, the policy that the customer is always right, and free home delivery of all purchases. Palmer set out particularly to win female customers. His store was the one place in Chicago where women could go unescorted. Palmer imported high-quality merchandise from Europe and the Orient, taught clerks to remember customers' names and preferences, and instructed them never to pressure visitors into buying. In short, Potter Palmer created shopping as we know it. In 1865, as a 39-year-old bachelor in poor health, he abruptly gave control of his business to the young Marshall Field and his partner Levi Z. Leiter, but remained their landlord. Then Palmer took a few years off to recuperate in Europe. Back in Chicago in 1868, he built a ball field for the Chicago White Stockings Baseball Club, later the Cubs, and spent time at the horse races. When he wasn't enjoying the sporting life, However, he was developing a plan to reshape his city. Palmer quietly bought up property on State Street, a narrow north-south thoroughfare parallel to the lakeshore. After he had acquired more than a mile of property, he asked the city council to widen the street to create a broad, Parisian-style boulevard. This was no simple task, and many State Street neighbors refused to set their buildings back to accommodate a new street. The resulting street cut back and forth between Palmer's new buildings and the older structures. After the Great Fire in 1871, however, the blocks were all regularized and State Street became wide enough to accommodate carriage parking and horse-drawn trolleys. Potter Palmer had single-handedly reoriented Chicago's downtown from Lake Street, an east-west road along the Stinking Canal, to the new, elegant boulevard that he virtually owned. A massive 6-story structure on the corner of State and Washington was leased to Field and Leiter for a new Marshall Field store. In 1870, Palmer had announced his marriage to Bertha Honore. As a wedding gift, he presented her with a hotel. The Palmer House was, at 8 stories, the tallest building in the city. Its 225 rooms were decorated with Italian marble and French chandeliers. Bertha had agreed to marry, saying she would be satisfied to be the wife of an innkeeper. The Great Fire destroyed the Palmer House Hotel before it was officially opened, and it was rebuilt quickly. Palmer claimed the new hotel was completely fireproof and backed a guarantee like he did in his old dry goods store. In advertisements, he dared anyone to light a hotel room on fire. If at the expiration of 1 hour, the fire does not spread beyond the room, the person accepting this invitation is to pay for all damages done and for the use of the room. If the fire does extend beyond the room, I claim it will not, there shall be no charge for the damage done.
Here at Graceland Cemetery, Chicago, Illinois, north side near Wrigley, just off of Irving Park Road and Clark Street. First stop, the infamous Eternal Silence for Dexter Graves. An old folk legend in Chicago states you stand in a certain spot and look up into the eyes, you can see your own death. Got my wife here by my side. She's iffy about the whole thing, but also nervous at the same time. No, I'm gonna go up here and do it.
No, don't be there.
Eternal Silence, alternatively known as the Dexter Graves Monument or the Statue of Death, is a monument in Chicago's Graceland Cemetery and features a bronze sculpture of a hooded and draped figure set upon, and backdropped by, black granite. It was created by American sculptor Lorado Taft in 1909. The monument commemorates Dexter Graves, who in 1831 led a group of 13 families from Ohio to settle in Chicago. Graves died in 1844, 75 years before the statue's creation and 16 years before Graceland Cemetery was founded. His body was presumably relocated from its original resting place at the Old City Cemetery, the present site of Lincoln Park. The will of Graves' son Henry, who died in 1907, provided $250,000 in funds for the monument and another $40,000, intended to commemorate Henry's favorite racehorse, Ike Cook. The Cook Monument was to stand alongside a drinking fountain for horses in Washington Park. 3. The horse monument never materialized, despite the construction of a model. Instead, in 1920, another Taft piece, Fountain of Time, was built in its place and features a hooded figure similar to the one in Eternal Silence.